Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Agiti, aka Black Girl Scientist. Welcome particularly to you if you are new here. If you're new here, don't forget to click the subscribe button so you can join the family. And of course, welcome back to my returning subscribers. So as you know by now, we're on part 3 of the Writing Your Thesis series. I shot a part 1, which was the literature review and introduction. Part 2 was the results and methods, and now part 3 is going to be the discussion and conclusions, and we're going to talk a little bit about turning your thesis, into a publication, so turning it into a manuscript. So if you're interested in this video, keep watching. So as I said, we are at part 3 of writing your thesis, and I've shot a part 1. So just like how a thesis is structured, you have a literature review and then an introduction, followed by the methods, how you did your study, then your results, which I described in my previous video as the heart of your thesis. This is really the part where you get to showcase everything you've done. And now my favorite part, my personal favorite part, is the discussion, and that's one of the aspects we're going to be discussing in this video. So in part 3, which is this video, we're going to be discussing the discussion and the conclusions, and then I'm also going to talk a little bit about how you can turn your thesis into a manuscript for publication, of course. And I mean, if you're in the science field or the academic field in general, a lot of people speak about publishing. The more seasoned researchers would really say it's a really kind of publish or perish kind of career. So if you don't publish, you won't be able to attract funding and things like that. If you don't have funding, you can't do research. So it's really kind of a cutthroat kind of way to think about it, but it is true. To some extent it is true. But I also don't want to say that if you don't publish, that doesn't make you a good researcher or a good scientist, if you don't publish. It just, some people just publish a lot and some people don't. And also, it's not always the quantity, it's not always depending on the quantity, of how you publish. Some people may publish a few journals that are of high impact though as well. So I really don't want to dwell too much about the publishing part in this video. I'm just going to touch on it a little bit toward the end. So what I do want to get into is my personal favorite part, which is writing your discussion. So if a reviewer or anyone that has been reading your thesis has been sleeping or has been bloozing the past literature review, introduction, results, and methods, they should wake up in your discussion. Okay, this is the most exciting part of the thesis. For me, it's the most exciting part of the paper. If you're reading a paper and the discussion, I find that to be the most exciting part, because you really get into the head kind of the author and how they've looked at their results and how they've analyzed them. So this is why it's my favorite part. So in writing your discussion, this is really where you get your thinking cap on, your analytical cap on. It's really the part where you get to be a scientist and analyze your data and give possible reasons for what you see in your results. So usually your discussion starts by reintroducing your readers to the study, so saying the study, the nature of the study, and then you go into really discussing your results. So when I'm talking about the beginning of the discussion, I'm not saying you're writing an introduction again in the discussion part. It's literally just 1 or 2 sentences where you kind of, because the reader has just read the methods and the results, they probably just read the results, and now you just want to orientate them of your study. So usually the beginning few lines, and this also happens in papers as well, is you reintroduce your readers to the study, or you kind of set the scene for the results that you're going to be discussing in your discussion. So it's really important to first of all do that, reorientate your reader, set the scene for all the yummy juicy parts that you're going to be discussing about your study. So in your discussion, like I said, you get your analytical cap on. So in my previous video, which was part 2, which was the methods and the results, I spoke about when you present your results section, you literally just describe your results. There's no analysis, there's no why did I get this, there's no possible, you know, hypotheses or postulations or anything that you make from getting the results. So I gave the example of a yellow box with a black border in describing your results, and that's literally what you would say in describing your results. Now in the discussion, you really analyze why it is you got that particular result. So why it is you got that particular result. Here again in the discussion, you revisit the literature, because you want to say in your discussion, is this maybe what's been seen in literature? Is it in contrast to what's been seen in literature? Are we filling in the gaps in a particular paper that you've read? Are we filling in the gaps in literature, which we should be filling in, especially if it's a PhD thesis? We're filling in the gaps. Maybe if a previous study, for example, because I do HIV research, looked at the particular TAT variation or the variation in a particular gene in the HIV genome, if they looked at that gene in patients that had been chronically infected, so these are patients that have not been recently infected, and now in my study I'm looking at, is it different? So this is where you can also compare to the literature as well and fill in the gaps to where you know, your study comes in. So now I am comparing, you know, that particular TAT gene variation, but in the acute phase of infection, because we have cohorts that I have access to which are recently infected, and we follow those people longitudinally. So that's where I would be referring to the literature in my discussion, that, you know, a study by so-and-so et al. In 2014, they studied the variation in chronic infection. However, my study is studying the variation in acute infection, and this is how we found, and this is how it's similar to that, or this is how it's different to that. So I hope you get where I'm going with that as well. And in the discussion, you really have to sift through the literature, and like in the literature review, where you really are trying to get a holistic kind of you know, a picture of where your study fits in the discussion, you really need to go to the results of these particular studies that you've been reading. What did they get? Is it similar to what you're getting? Is it different to what you're getting? You know, are you comparing the two results? And also, where are you filling in the gaps? So as you can see, like, the discussion is a very, very dynamic part of your thesis. I think this is the part as well, I stand to be corrected, that reviewers also really see and look, as you know, at your analytical skills, as your skills as a scientist, for example, and have you really engaged with your data? Have you engaged with your results? Have you given reasons for why you have gotten particular results? Have you been analyzing the results? Have you revisited the literature, you know, in everything that I just discussed in your discussion part? So that's really the discussion, and like I said, it's my favorite part. This is the part that I really think that you get to be a scientist, you get to showcase your skills, you know, you get to think critically, you get to think out of the box, you know, you try and look at your data from every single possible angle to put that in that discussion section. So that is really the entire discussion, and also it doesn't have to be long. I think this is about the quality that you write rather than the quantity. You don't want to make it super long where you are literally just revisiting every single thing. This is the crux, you know, of your study. You want to hit, like, you know, quality. You want to write a quality discussion where you've shown that you've critically analyzed, you know, you're not rambling, you're not going on and on and on, and this is encapsulating again your study, because you start with reorientating the reader, and then you discuss all these nice exciting results and, you know, juicy parts that you want to talk about, and then that is the discussion. So now you see, guys, now you see why the discussion I've been saying is my favorite part. And then the conclusion, I actually was thinking about this before filming, is that a lot of papers that I've read now, they actually don't have a conclusion section, like a conclusion subheading. The conclusion is just part of the discussion. It's under that subheading. So they discuss, and then they'll have a paragraph which is the concluding paragraph, although it may not sometimes be labeled conclusion. And that's papers that I've read in my field particularly. So I know in my thesis, in my master's thesis, I did have a conclusion. It was about 3/4 of a page, if I'm not mistaken, about half to 3/4 of a page. And again, this is something that is just short, succinct, punchy, to the point. If I pick up your thesis and I just read the conclusion, I should be able to know what your study was about, and the major findings that you found, and then the most important thing is the significance of the findings that you found, and also future studies. So in doing your study, in conducting your study, and this happens even in papers and manuscripts that are published, they always mention that, okay, they've done the study, they've shown this and they've shown that, and this is the significance of it, and future work is going to include ABC, or these are the further gaps that, you know, this study has opened to future research. So that's really important in your conclusion statement, as they call it, a concluding statement. So it's not super long or anything like that. It's just really, you know, the major findings of your study, the significance of them, and then the future work. So that is really you know, what I wanted to say and guide you on about the discussion and conclusion. And that's what this whole writing your thesis series has really been about. It's guiding people that are writing. You know, I also want to create a community that if you've written theses and stuff, that you can leave us comments down below about, you know, what worked for you, what didn't work for you, and we can all really be there for each other and help each other. And I also wanted to create excitement about writing, because writing is exciting. If you're a researcher, you're definitely going to have to write. And of course, in us talking about writing, if you're a researcher, of course, you're going to have to publish as well. So publishing in journals, in international journals, is really, really important. It's important. I mean, you're not just doing this research for fun. You're not just doing it, you know, for anything. Of course, you're passionate about it, but you also want to put your work out there. You want to contribute, you know, to research at large. Like for me, doing HIV research, I want to contribute as well to research toward finding a cure for HIV. You know, you want your work to be out there. So that's where the publishing part comes. And I also mentioned earlier in the video that a lot of researchers speak about publishing and perishing. And of course, it's very, very important for you to publish. Especially in your PhD, you want to publish at least one first author paper. So it's really important to take now your thesis, or I mean, not even if it's at the end, like you may have phases in your project where you have a paper, you know, at each phase. It's really important to turn your writing and your research into a manuscript that you can publish. And of course, you are very much guided by your supervisor, you know, about this. They have probably published, they must have published, you know, and they will guide you on this, and writing to write to publish. So writing to publish is different from writing a thesis, and that's going to be, you know, a completely different video that I probably do later on about writing to publish. It's very different than writing your thesis, and I have touched on it throughout, you know, about the methods that in your thesis they are super long and super detailed, whereas when you're writing up a manuscript, they are super succinct, to the point, and you know, they don't go into major detail of your method. So yeah, at the end of it, you want to turn your thesis into a paper or 2 or 3 or 4 and you want to publish, you know, as a researcher. And after your PhD, of course, you would be what's called an early career scientist, and of course in that you'd also have to publish as well. So that brings me to the end of my writing your thesis series, as well as to the end of this video. If you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed the series, if you have any further comments or questions, please go ahead and leave me a comment below. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already subscribed. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.